We read in the book of Psalms many passages where there is a call for revenge. Then we look at the New Testament, where the emphasis appears to be placed on forgiving our enemies. For instance, in Psalm 139, David says, "Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies." So how should we deal with these things when Yeshua asks us to forgive our enemies? Thank you.
You see, the idea that the New Testament and the Hebrew Scriptures are two different books, as if written by two different authors, is a misconception that brought many writers to select passages from both sides and put the Scriptures against Scriptures. But there is as much love and grace in the Hebrew Scriptures as in the New Testament. And there is as much loathing of what is sin and evil in the Hebrew Scriptures as in the New Testament. For instance, the idea of not hating our enemy is not foreign to the Hebrew Scriptures. There are passages in the Mosaic Law which order a person to respect even his or her enemy, as in Exodus 23:4, where we read, "If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him." Hating is not permitted by the law, even hating our enemy. So this law is a good antidote to hate. In the book of Proverbs 25:21, a passage that is cited by Paul in Romans 12:20 says, "If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink." Yeshua did bring this law to another level in that he orders us to even love our enemies. But this does not mean that one portion of the Bible encourages anger and hatred while the other encourages love and grace. And this idea of separating both sections of the Bible is often due to a misconstructing what Yeshua said on the Sermon on the Mount, when he said in Matthew 5:43-44,
"You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you."
You see, Yeshua, Jesus, was not comparing the Hebrew Scriptures with the New Testament. He is one who inspired both, but he is comparing the words of the religious people to the words and intent found in the Scriptures. These are two different things. Now, concerning Psalm 139, what prompted David to speak this way when he said, "Do I not hate those who hate you? They have become my enemies"? It was actually his deep love for God and respect for his holiness and a desire to see perfect justice carry that. He was not seeking personal revenge. Those in view here have gone a step further in promoting and encouraging evil, and David's loathing of evil is reflected in many passages of the New Testament. For instance, Revelation 16 describes the destruction of those same people who not only persist by fostering evil around them, but cannot close their eyes actually to it in encouraging it all the time. Or one may compare David's words with those of our Messiah in Matthew 23 with the 8 woes for the religious leaders. These are very powerful as well. And furthermore, this idea of separating the Hebrew Scriptures from the New Testament may also be due to a bias against the Jews. They see Jews in the Hebrew Scriptures, that is, and Christian in the New Testament, as if they're completely separated. One famous proponent and advocate of this view, which sees a great gulf between the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament, was C.S. Lewis. In his book Reflection of Psalm, after reading about David's desire for justice, he writes, and I quote, "Nearly always the psalmist is the indignant plaintiff. The difference," he says, "between Christian and Jew is the Christian pictures the case to be tried as a criminal case with himself in the dock. The Jew pictures it as a civil case with himself as the plaintiff. And he adds, the one, the Christian, hopes for acquittal, or rather for pardon. The other, the Jews, hopes for resounding triumph with heavy damages. And he goes on bashing King David when he says, and I quote again, he is quite sure apparently that his own hands are clean. He never did to others the horrid things that others are doing to him. You see, the problem is that while C.S. Lewis is a great thinker, and I personally read and benefited from many of his books, but he was not a theologian. And this is reflected in his understanding or misunderstanding of the place of Israel in the book of Psalms. But he was a great philosopher and also a great novelist. These quotes coming from C.S. Lewis are very surprising, even more when you think that his wife was a Messianic Jew. But unfortunately, it was a short-lived marriage, for she passed away 4 years after their wedding. However, I want to say that in other writings, he recognizes the place of Israel in the scriptures. Once he wrote that he found himself as a Syrophoenician woman who came to ask Jesus for a piece of bread. And he wrote that the Hebrews, and I quote, the Hebrews are spiritually senior to us, that God did entrust the descendant of Abraham with the first revelation of himself. Now, how can Lewis speak both languages? On the one hand, loving the Jews, on the other hand, really bashing them. The phenomenon, let me tell you, is more widespread than we think. Perhaps it is so because it is so hard to let go of centuries of tradition where accusation and distortion concerning the Jewish people have prevailed.